Thanks, Ted. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock in the morning here, so bright, sunny, beautiful day. Can you hear me? Okay, then. So I shall go through the first presentation. It's dated May this year. I put this together. Well, I actually put this presentation together 12 months ago, and I used it back in New Zealand. It's with GAIA, the impact of GAIA is so profound on what we're doing and will be doing that it's worth reviewing what GAIA is going to offer for us generally. So the first half of this, maybe it's familiar to a lot of people, but I think it's worthwhile going through. Next slide. Now, in this talk, a number to remember is for main belt asteroids, 1 milliarc second is about 2 kilometres on the Earth, or for you Americans, a milliarc second, a bit more than a mile. Pre-GAIA, the typical uncertainty to star position is 50 milliarc seconds. Typical uncertainty in an asteroid position, 150 milliarc seconds. So uncertainty in asteroid position, 200 miles. And your problem pre-GAIA was, for any event, you have a difference between observed and predicted, and you never knew what the cause was, whether it was a star or the asteroid. One of the problems with looking at past observations is that there was no real way, because of that, to improve predictions based on recent observations of asteroidal occultations. Next slide. That's just an image of the guts of the GAIA spacecraft. It's got a big ring, which I don't know how it all works. Very complicated thing. The detectors saturate at magnitude 12. They've worked out how to get down to magnitude 3, and that was included, I think, in the first data release. But I was talking to one of the chief people behind GAIA in New Zealand last year, and they have great expectations of being able to measure all 243 stars that are brighter than magnitude 3, which will give us a complete coverage to at the bright end and down to magnitude 20 at the faint end. Next slide. GAIA's a rotating satellite. This shows the two distributions. The left-hand plot is a plot of the sky global plot. You can see in the yellow is low density, purple, black is high density. You can see the Milky Way in that plot. And the right-hand plot is a plot of the number of observations in a 6-month period. You can see that the scanning pattern, curiously, has a minimum along the ecliptic. It has periods where it has high density along the ecliptic, but overall around the ecliptic, the coverage is less than for the regions towards the ecliptic poles. Not sure what the effect of that is long term, because it still gets coverage. Next slide. Now, first impact for GAIA is on star positions. We've already seen the benefits of this. We'll be getting micro arc second positions of stars for positions, proper motions and parallaxes down to about magnitude 20, the order of 1 billion stars. Radial velocities, the telescope's got a spectroscope on it. It only looks at a fairly narrow spectral region. From memory, it's somewhere in the red. I could be wrong there. But it looks at a relatively narrow region in the spectrum and can do a crude spectral type and radial velocities down to magnitude 16. It will also produce element abundances for stars brighter than magnitude 11. And probably the most important thing ultimately for us, it's going to do positions and orbits of asteroids, including TNO, and some TNOs to magnitude 20 or thereabouts. Next slide. Next. This is just a plot of showing the accuracy, expected accuracy against magnitude. It's a plot from magnitude 12 to 20, and the vertical scale is micro arc seconds or micro arc seconds per year for proper motions. So you can see that the bottom line, the brown line, is the proper motions, which is important for the long term once GAIA mission is over, what the future's going to hold. You can see there magnitude 12 expected accuracy of the proper motion is 13 micro arc seconds a year. So it would take 1,000 years basically before it reduces to the current type of accuracies that we might have in proper motion, or maybe just 100 years. And positions and parallax, and parallax can be important for a range of stars. Next slide. For variable stars, multi-epoch photometry, GAIA can detect variability on timescales between seconds and the order of 5 years. That's the project length. They estimate, maybe the estimation's a little bit old, but they're estimating detecting the order of 18 million stars, including 5 million classic C feeds, 3 million eclipsing binaries, with orbital parameters for 10,000 eclipsing binaries, 300,000 stars with rotational induced variability, 250,000 mirrors, 60 to 440,000 delta Scudi's. Yeah, you can see the list there. And our current AVSO index catalogue, which identifies, lists all known variable stars, has a mere 342,000 entries. So there's going to be a huge impact on variables there. Next slide.
Drops a breaking ball in there for a strike. Former Red Sox third baseman Will Middlebrooks.
GAIA and double stars. They're estimating 700,000 radial velocity orbits, 800,000 with radial velocity with an astrometric orbit, so you match the astrometric positions with radial velocities. 2 million astrometry orbits, 4 million non-linear proper motion systems, 40 million resolved binaries. They're hoping to resolve all binaries with separations greater than 20 milliarc seconds, assuming they only have a moderate magnitude difference. If there's a large magnitude difference, you need a greater separation. Compare that with Washington Double Star Catalogue, which lists all visual double stars, 135,000, and the Washington interferometric catalogue, 83,000 pairs. Again, GAIA is going to radically change the situation for doubles. Next slide. The GAIA first release, which we had just 12 months ago now, positions in right edge declination and the G magnitudes, which is a, crudely speaking, a visual magnitude, for about 70% of stars. Wasn't 100%. There were any stars where any significant queries were excluded. And then they gave positions and proper motions and parallax for stars in common between the Tycho 2 catalogue and GAIA. They were able to link the results from Tycho, Hipparchus and Tycho, into the data from GAIA to improve the results there. Now, I speculate I've got, well, no, I don't speculate. I don't know to what extent they'll keep on using the Tycho 2 data for future data releases. Don't know. Next slide. That's oh yes. One of the issues with the first data release was it didn't include proper motions, and proper motions have a significant impact. So there have been 3 efforts at dealing with this. The first thing was something I put together for our work, and I got it out within, I think, about a week of GAIA data release. One is what I call GAIA 14. It includes the Tycho GAIA stars plus all GAIA stars to magnitude 14, and I derived proper motions using UCAC for the mean epoch positions, which was a position based on not the UCAC for astrometric date or imaging date, but the mean epoch used for proper motions, for their proper motion solution. H-Soy, hot stuff for 1 year. They derived a large catalogue. I think it's the largest of the 3 options. They derived the proper motions using PPM-XL, longer proper motion base, but the reliability of the proper motions at the fate end is limited by the accuracy of the early epoch PPM-XL data. And then UCAC5, USNO went through a process of re-reducing all the UCAC images using GAIA as their the Tycho GAIA solution as the reference source for the position source for the reference stars when they reduce the astrometry of the plates. So they completely re-reduced their imaging plates to drive improved positions of the stars that they measured in the UCAC catalogue for their imaging date, and then derive proper motions, which means in principle UCAC5 ought to give the best accuracy positions for current epochs when you the proper motion should be the most reliable out of there, limited by the relatively short proper motions. Next slide. The next data release, I assume it's still planned for around May next year. There's been some movement forwards and backwards about the next data release. And it was supposed to come out originally about September, October this year. They've pushed it back to May next year. Because I think the results, they can get out much better results by pushing it back. The first bit, positions, proper motions, parallax for all objects which they can see as single stars. Critically, and I'll come back to this I think a bit later on, they're going to have positions, but not the orbits, for about 100,000 stars. I'll mention here, in case I don't mention it later on, a couple of months ago I had made contact with Gareth Williams at the Minor Planet Centre to find out what they're going to be doing, and I was assured by Gareth that they're actually intending to incorporate these positions into their orbit determination pretty much from date of release, which is fairly critical because that will mean we ought to get the advantage of the positional data for 100,000 asteroids fairly soon after data release 2. The data release will also have blue and red colours for the stars and mean radial velocities, which radial velocities doesn't really affect what we do. Next slide. The final data release, which is 2022, not all that far off now, that's only 5 years. Full astrometric, photometric and radial velocity catalogues, variable star and double and single stars and double star solutions, source classifications, astrophysical parameters for stars, unresolved binaries, galaxies, quasars, a list of possible exoplanets. You get a whole heap of source data and all ground-based observations made for data processing purposes. That last bit for our work is actually fairly critical. Again, if I don't mention it later on, one of the interesting discussions I had with this guy, I forget his name, who's he's one of the lead gurus of the GAIA project. I was talking to him about the accuracy of asteroids and the micro arc second positions that we get out of GAIA. And hey, that's going to be really high precisions for the asteroid. In fact, the super high precision is limited for an interesting reason to stars. For the asteroids, the limiting factor is in fact our knowledge of the position of the GAIA spacecraft at the time of each observation. So the accuracy in which we'll be able to predict the position of the asteroid is the same as the accuracy which we know the position in kilometres or metres of the GAIA spacecraft relative to the Earth, I guess, or in the solar system coordinate system. And for this purpose, they have some dedicated telescopes regularly imaging the GAIA spacecraft against the stellar background so that they can measure accurately the position of the GAIA spacecraft. And that's so that they can tie down the accuracy of the asteroids. Interesting issue. Next slide. Now, the issues with our first release, and my apologies for all my little noticons are not in the right spot in the way this is getting displayed. Never mind. We've got proper motions and parallaxes for 70% of stars by 11.5 are available in Tycho GAIA catalogue, and that's great. For the majority of stars, we know exactly where the star is. For fainter stars, the positions are smiley, but no proper motions. That's unfortunate, but we've resolved the proper motion issue with those GAIA 14, HSOI and UCAC5, so that's all effectively solved. There are no entries for stars that show evidence of a companion, which is a potential issue, but the experience from what I've seen is if the companion is half a second or a second of arc or more away from the primary star, then they're both there. The ones that aren't there is the companion is very close to the primary star. All of this has meant that for events up to about 2018, that's next year, the positional uncertainty of stars at magnitude 12 is around about 4 milliarc seconds, or 8 kilometres, 5 miles. Magnitude 15, 10 milliarc seconds, it's 20 kilometres, 15 miles or something. In the scheme of the types of uncertainties that we have been typically dealing with, currently we're at the position for most stars that we know where the star is located. The star position is no longer a problem for us. Next slide. Uncertainty in asteroid orbits, prime limitation on current predictions. All these events where we're seeing it's not where we expect it to be, almost certainly it's all tied up with the orbit of the asteroid. Asteroid orbits from GAIA, not available, or the original plan was not available until the fourth release in August 2019. I haven't updated myself on when that's going to happen now. That date's probably wrong. Second release next year, 100,000 asteroids will have the positions. And Minor Planet Center is used to dealing with positions obtained from spacecraft. So they'll be able to fully incorporate the observations into their data set. And as I said beforehand here, the GAIA positions will be included in their orbit solutions pretty much straight away. Next slide. The long-term situation, and this is where things start getting exciting. In the long term, I guess we're talking here a few years' time, only a small number of years probably. Past predictions, we might be able to get an accuracy of about 1 kilometre. Instead of the current, we're lucky if they're good to 100 kilometres on a routine event. That means we'll be able to plan an event with certainty apart from the weather. And that has a whole heap of implications about what we can do. At the moment, our observing program is basically we'll observe anything that happens to pass nearby, whereas in the future, I suspect that we'll start focusing on efforts on studying particular asteroids. And at the moment we focus on bright asteroids with stars which are mostly somewhat brighter. So asteroids which are fairly bright, we'll be able to include fainter asteroids if needs be, because they'll have accurate orbits as well. But if we've got path predictions accurate to about 1 kilometre, then an interesting concept we need to start thinking about is to incorporate shape model predictions into our predictions, path predictions, so that we can accurately predict the path edge location. And also then we start distinguishing between shape model solutions. But I mean, we know that some asteroids have interesting shapes. At the moment we just use a mean diameter, remembering what I said about mean diameters yesterday, and that puts the path edge location. Well, in reality, the width of the path that we use in the predictions is probably uncertain, the order of 20%, when you look at the possibilities of the rotation of the asteroid. And if we've got highly accurate capabilities for highly accurate path predictions, we are going to have to start incorporating the effects of the shape models in the predictions of the path, which is somewhat daunting aspect. I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but that's where we're heading. I see Ted Blank says, you mean 100,000 asteroids? Yes, it's 100,000 asteroids. Oh, yes, it is 100,000 asteroids. Yeah, I think that the first data release is 10,000 asteroids. The final data release is going to have many hundreds of thousands of asteroids. Oh, 100,000, no. I'm losing track of what I'm saying. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is some elements of future thinking about what we might be planning or thinking about and observing programs in years to come. We need to start thinking about identifying asteroids that we should focus our attention on. Issues such as binary asteroids, asteroids with shape models, and this is starting to become an issue already for us now, but do we say our primary focus should be asteroids with shape models so that we can fit our chords to the shape models to derive the size and then go on through with the density and so forth. Thinking about focusing on asteroids having some other characteristic of importance. And asteroids fall into a range of different classes, and we might want to think about looking at certain classes of asteroids. Next slide. We also need to think about frequency of events involving an asteroid, which if you have an asteroid passing through the star-rich clouds around Sagittarius or through the Milky Way up around the Taurus region, the probability of the asteroid passing in front of a star is that much greater. So if we're selecting asteroids to observe rather than just observing any that come along, do we start focusing on asteroids when they move through star-rich regions of the sky? Aim being to get numerous events over some months and maps into shape models. And the other issue is events involving faint, therefore small asteroids may be predicted more often. I mean, we tend not to predict events involving asteroids faint at much smaller than about 20K. So it indicated yesterday in Europe they've had some success in getting events with asteroids down in the 5 to 10K range. But if we've got a prediction accuracy of a kilometre or so, then there's no reason why we can't start successfully predicting occultations of asteroids down at the 2 or 3 kilometre diameter size against relatively bright stars, and then setting up a narrow observing fence wherever over a couple of kilometres to measure the parameters of that small asteroid. And I suspect there's a whole heap of valuable information that can come out of observing those small asteroids. So the faint asteroids, the asteroids down at magnitude 19, 20, whatever, which we don't include in our predictions, they become viable targets. Next slide. So in summary, GAIA data release 1's effectively removed the star position as a cause of uncertainty. Our knowledge of the asteroid position is the biggest problem. Release 2 offers promise of high prediction accuracy because for the 10,000 star asteroids which will be included in that data release, the orbits will be hugely improved, and we can expect path locations to be better than 10 kilometres, all being well. And we will need to develop a strategy for selecting events that we want to focus on and for placing observers across the path. I guess the other way of expressing that is we'll probably have to have a much more strategic focus in our planning of occultation events. And that's it, last slide, which is, let's talk. Any questions? Are there plans for occult to be enhanced to deal with hundreds of times more potential predictions? The issue with occult is not the number of predictions. Occult can handle any number of predictions, and it has, I believe, the filtering tools in there are sufficient to sort it out. The issues that come about, I expect I'm going to be faced with some significant revisions on the. We're going to be having increased precision of certain things. In the short term, I believe that the accuracy I have for the orbital parameters and in the integration scheme that I'm using is sufficiently accurate for our needs, but I'll need to review that. In particular, in occult, I use a 10-day integration scheme, which is okay for main belt asteroids, but for anything that comes close to the Earth, that is the 10 days is far too long. and in the medium to long term, I'll need to change that. The star position accuracy at the moment, the accuracy issue, I can cope with a milliarc second precision in the star positions, and I think that flows through to the asteroids. In the short term, that'll be sufficient. In the medium term, I'm probably going to have to look at expanding the accuracy that's available there. On the reduction side, our data for our past observations, the whole data, the format of the data and the observations, that's going to have a significant revision to allow the full precision of the star positions and a few other bits of data to be incorporated in there. And there's some other bits I want to include in there, such as shape model identifications and derived diameters out of there. So a fair bit of revision is ahead of me in the years to come. But my starting position is on the simple prediction side. Occult will identify the events which are going to come close to you. The filtering capacities within occult, at this stage, my belief is they provide everything we need. On the sheer number of events, that's a number crunching thing. And the way occult works, and the only logical way that you can do predictions, is you've got to generate occultation elements for all asteroids that you're looking at. You can't do the filtering until you've generated the occultation elements, and it's best to generate the occultation elements for all possible events and then apply filtering. I hope I haven't waffled on too long there. I probably have, but hopefully that answers that question.
Deep left center. Wade going back, still back, and it's going to be off the base of the wall. Ellsbury plays it out there. Coming home is Nicholas. He'll score.
Any other questions?
And it's 16-7 Yankees.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, then we can go on to the last presentation, which